Refused to pay for my son's rehearsal dinner because his fiancée insulted my other daughter-in-law, and now family tensions are escalating. Just for background, my husband and I have 3 sons, Luis, Cyril, and Jamie, all 20 to 30. Cyril has been with his girlfriend Rosa, 27, for 5 years, and Jamie has been with his now wife Lucy, 20, for a bit longer. We are all very close since it was just this year that my oldest 2 boys moved out, Jamie and Lucy, and their 2-year-old daughter Letty will be living with us for a few more years since Lucy is still in school. We are absolutely fine with this. They are both helpful, sweet, and wonderful parents despite everything. Plus they're not taking my grandbaby anywhere as long as I can help it, lol. Luis started dating Jessa, 36F, about a year ago and got engaged a few weeks ago. To be perfectly honest, I'm not totally sure about her, but he seems happy and has been through a lot. I don't want to be some evil mother-in-law and have really tried getting to know her, but I think we're just very different. She's kind of conservative politically, and my husband is a US citizen but was born in Mexico, so as you can imagine I do not support and did not vote for the current administration. Rosa, Lucy, and I have bonded in the past by going to rallies, protests, etc., and this all came up when I tried including Jessa and invited her. She declined and sent me a long text. Nothing crazy QAnon, but like we'd call them Reagan Republicans in my day, not that it's the same these days at all. It was still so awkward, but I've continued trying to invite her to non-political things, but I think that one invitation soured things. Other than politics, I've also found Jess's attitude towards Jamie and especially Lucy gross. I'm not stupid, I don't think that 2 people with such a big age gap would become BFFs, but Jessa seems to go out of her way to make snide comments about Lucy when she's not there. I haven't said anything BC, it's her wedding and 100% her choice, but also think it's odd that she asked Rosa to be a bridesmaid but was even saying she didn't know if they'd be inviting Lucy to the reception. She thinks she should stay home watching Letty because she won't have fun since she won't let her drink. The venue does allow people under 21 and one of her sisters is 19 and invited. Also showing Lucy pictures of her sister that Jamie would walk down the aisle. Rosa and Lucy have both acknowledged it but haven't seemed too upset. It's still gross. Anyways, Jessa texted us earlier asking about the budget for the rehearsal dinner, and I just feel like I don't want to spend any more money on this than I have to. My husband thinks it's best to just leave it, but it feels like the principle of the matter. Plus they're not even having a rehearsal or anything. They just want to have a dinner. My husband's stance is that it's true we help Jamie and Lucy a bit more than our other sons currently, but we paid for Cyril's college and more expensively Luis' rehab. 7 years sober, we are all so proud. He said not to let politics get in between family, but even if she was a true blue liberal I wouldn't like the way she has been treating Jamie and Lucy. Ultimately, I want to continue having a close relationship with my children and their partners, but I also don't want to be walked all over, and I don't want to seem like I'm condoning bullying. Lucy's family completely abandoned her, so we're all she has left. I don't want her to feel like we don't care about her. At the same time, I know I'm biased towards them since Jamie is my baby and I've known Lucy for so long that she's like the daughter I never had. Update 1. As I mentioned, I want to be a good mill. I remember when my boys were young and we'd watch Everybody Loves Raymond and saying I would never be a Marie. I mentioned our political differences to be upfront. I know it's a bias, but it's not the main reason I dislike Jessa, just one of them. I get that I would be the asshole do not pay for their rehearsal dinner. A few of you gave me the advice to just let my kids work it out, and some of you said to talk to Luis one-on-one, so I invited him to lunch yesterday. Before that I had texted the 2 of them back saying that we'd love to plan them a rehearsal dinner and to let us know if they had any ideas, and Jessa sent us a contract for a place with an $11,000 minimum. We have about $10,000 saved up for each of our kids for their wedding/first home/honeymoons. Before you ask, we spent about $750 on Lucy and Jamie's entire wedding, much cheaper when all their friends don't drink. And I didn't want him to feel like I was only taking him to lunch to talk about the wedding, so we did talk about quite a few other things before I asked him how the wedding planning was going. He kind of shrugged like you know how it is, so I asked if I could help in any way. He declined, and thanked me for helping with the rehearsal dinner. I told him the cost was more than we were planning, but we are happy to do so for family. Edit. Sorry to spell it out. He acknowledged that Lucy would be invited to all wedding festivities. He got kind of flustered at that and just started laying into me about how angry he was at Jamie. I told some of you, but originally Jamie was supposed to be best man. He and Luis were always so close. When Jamie had first moved out of our house a few years ago, he would call Luis every single day and they'd talk forever. Same thing when Luis moved out last year. I knew after a blow-up Jamie stepped down as best man, but I did not realize they were this angry with each other. I have never heard Luis talk about anyone, much less Jamie, this way. He called him an asshole, and was like he needs to grow up, stop being so controlling and get over himself, and said that Jamie just didn't want to see him happy. There were other insinuations that I feel were incredibly unfair and untrue, but I let him get out his issues. I know you all think I'm so overbearing, but I had not realized their relationship had gotten so bad. I listened to his airing of grievances for a while and honestly I didn't push back much, it was so shocking. And later when I told Jamie I had gotten lunch with Luis, he was just like, oh cool, like nothing was going on. We're just not a family that has these kind of dramas. I told my husband I just thought I should let the boys work it out among themselves. He said we'll see. Update 2. Please be kind to me. I know that I have not been a perfect mother or mother-in-law, and I know these issues aren't mine to fight, but my family is falling apart. Last weekend my son Jamie and his wife Lucy went out of town for a concert. My husband and I stayed home and had Letty and we had a great time, although they probably FaceTimed us every 2 hours all day Saturday. Saturday evening Luis and Jessa invited us out to dinner. We told them we could go somewhere but would need to be home by 8 for Letty to go to bed, or they could come to our place and we could get takeout and hang out here. I assumed they wanted to talk about the rehearsal dinner. They didn't respond until after I got home from church, and my son just texted me and said we were thinking somewhere nicer, never mind. Kind of odd, but whatever. Everyone got home safety but Jessa and Luis skipped our Sunday dinner the next day. Then a few days ago, I was home with Lucy and Letty, and Luis came over with Jessa to pick up the ring. Luis has this thing with Letty where he'll walk in and say ring ring. And she'll yell hello. And then he picks her up and gives her hugs and kisses. But he came in and was just ignoring her, so she ran up with her arms out and yelled hello. And he just walked past her. He got what he needed and they left, but I was appalled. I asked Lucy if we should tell Jamie and she just said that we probably shouldn't, but how are you going to be rude to your niece? She's also his goddaughter, just because you're mad at her dad. But that brings us to yesterday. I was out grocery shopping. Apparently, keep in mind I was not there. Luis came over to bring something to my husband, who was outside / in the garage with Jamie and Letty. Luis and Jamie got into an altercation that became physical. My husband says that Luis instigated the physical fight, but he's not sure of the rest since his only goal was to get Letty inside. When he got back outside it seemed over and nobody was hurt, but they were still yelling at one another. My husband told Luis to leave, and when he did, had Jamie go downstairs to cool down. I asked him what even started the fight. He said he isn't even sure, everything escalated so quickly and I have never seen him so shaken in so long. We don't know how we're going forward, but I finally agree with you all. This is Jamie and Luis' issue to work out. I can't blame myself and I certainly can't fix it myself. My husband and I told Luis he was no longer welcome at our home, and he lashed out at us, telling us we were taking his side, and I told him listen, he attacked his brother in front of his child, they both deserve to live somewhere they feel safe. The other thing is that Luis works for my husband, and he's well within his rights to make him do a drug test. As for the wedding, I have no idea what to do. My husband says we should just give them the money we promised them and be done with it. That breaks my heart, but it might be the only way. Jamie just has told me a few times we just need to get through the wedding and maybe things will work themselves out. I don't know if he means that, to be honest. I'm just so sick. I wish there was something I can do. I am trying to set up some time to spend with my middle son, Cyril. I feel bad that he's in the middle of all of this too and don't want him to think I've forgotten about him. Update 3. I feel like every time I think we've hit the worst of it, something else rolls in. Monday morning my husband told Luis he needed to come in and take a drug test. He didn't do it. He turned in his keys and walked out. He said he wasn't going to be treated like a criminal by his own father, and if we didn't trust him we didn't deserve him. He was cold, like he was speaking through a window, and my husband just stood there with his mouth open. Within an hour Jessa texted us a paragraph accusing us of weaponizing employment and telling us we were not to contact Luis during business hours ever again, and if my husband withheld his paycheck they'd be contacting a lawyer. He wasn't going to withhold anything. He wasn't even thinking about that. He was outside in the driveway staring at the mailbox like it was going to explain their son to him. That night Cyril and Rosa came over with a bottle of ginger beer and those fizzy waters I like, and I knew from Rosa's face something else went wrong. Jessa texted her that it would be cleaner if Rosa stepped down as bridesmaid because it was a conflict of interest with her current social circle. I didn't understand, and Rosa pulled up a screenshot from a group chat where Jessa had been going on about how Lucy brings drama and is a child, and that if Rosa was going to be in her ear all the time it would be one more problem to fix. So Rosa is out, but Jessa's 19-year-old sister and a cousin we've never met are in. Rosa was crying because she'd had her alterations done and had planned the shower with 2 of Jessa's friends, and now she feels like a fool. Cyril took her hand and said they were still going to show up on the day and he wasn't going to let anybody embarrass his fiancée, but I could tell he was furious, the quiet kind of furious where the muscles in your jaw jump. Tuesday morning Luis finally called me. He sounded tired. He said the rehearsal dinner was going to be moved to the place Jessa found and that the deposit needed to be made by Friday. I told him again we don't have $11,000 for a dinner and asked if we could look at someplace else, maybe the little restaurant where we did Jamie and Lucy's. He went silent for a long second and then he just blurted out that Jessa is pregnant. I didn't say the right thing. I know I didn't because I didn't say anything for a beat. I was listening to the kitchen clock tick and just imagining Letty's baby crib we still have up in the guest room and picturing my son as a dad and also picturing him storming out of his job and ignoring his goddaughter, and I could not find a single sentence that held all of that. So I think I said, "Oh." Then I said, "Are you happy?" And he started crying. He said yes, he was happy, he was terrified, he was angry at everyone, he was trying to do things right, and that Jamie keeps telling him he's not ready and that makes him want to punch a wall. I said, "Do not punch walls, that's my wall," and he laughed a little and then he said, "Mom, please don't make this harder, we just want one nice thing." I asked if Jessa was okay and he said she's been sick and stressed and they moved the wedding up a month because she wants to be married before she starts to show. He asked if we were going to throw them a dinner or if he should ask her dad. I told him we will celebrate you, but it's not going to be a nightclub buyout. I said we would pay for a real rehearsal dinner at a place we can afford where the people in the wedding party can eat a meal, say a Toast, and go home. I told him Jessa is welcome to pick the restaurant and we will call and set it up. He said he'd talk to her and hung up. I thought that was going to be the big thing this week. It wasn't. Wednesday morning I got a call from a woman who introduced herself as Teresa, Jessa's mom. I braced myself. She was soft-spoken. She said she didn't want to step on my toes but could we meet for coffee because she thinks things are getting out of hand and she doesn't want us to become enemies over children who are still children even if they won't admit it. We met at the little diner I love where they know I don't like onions in my omelet. She looked exhausted too. She told me Jessa had a miscarriage 2 years ago at 8 weeks and then another last summer, and that she doesn't broadcast it because she hates pity, and that she thinks that's part of what's going on. This white-knuckled need to control every detail so the thing she actually can't control doesn't fall apart. She told me her husband's chemo isn't going well. She was not making excuses but she was showing me the room they were all standing in. I told her I didn't hate her daughter, I hated the way my kids were talking to each other and that my house felt like a tight shoe. I told her I don't know how to make space for Jessa when she goes out of her way to ice out Lucy and make snide comments. Teresa nodded and said, she thinks Lucy doesn't like her and she panics and she goes for the jugular when she panics. Then she winced. She said she's tried to get Jessa to do therapy before, that Jessa did 3 sessions, declared the therapist an idiot and never went back. We drank our coffee and it actually felt like we could be people to each other. While we were still at the diner the fancy venue called me. The poor coordinator sounded young. She said she had a contract from the bride and needed the credit card for the minimum by end of day. I told her we hadn't signed anything and aren't responsible for it. I said we would be doing the dinner elsewhere and I was so sorry for the confusion. She was polite but I could hear the dread in her voice and I felt bad for her even as my ears were burning. 10 minutes later Jessa texted me that I had humiliated her and that she couldn't count on us for the bare minimum. Then Luis chimed in and told me if I cared about him I would stop punishing him for being happy. I said, I will not be spoken to like that. We are thrilled for your baby. We cannot afford that venue. We will pay for dinner at local mid-range place, for your wedding party and parents. If that doesn't work for you we can give you the money we set aside and you do what you will. He didn't reply. I sat in my car and cried into a fast food napkin that I found under the seat. I was half sure we wouldn't hear from them again for a while. That night, around 11:30, Luis called my husband. He sounded panicked. He'd taken Jessa to the ER because she was bleeding. He asked my husband about the insurance because he'd quit and was scared they wouldn't see her. My husband was already putting his shoes on while he was still talking. He picked him up and took him. I stayed awake on the couch with Lucy, who kept refreshing her phone like it was going to make time move. Around 1 o'clock my husband called me from the hallway outside the emergency room. He said Jessa didn't want extra people in with her but the doctor had come out to say there was a heartbeat and that it could be a threatened miscarriage or it could be nothing and they were going to put her on pelvic rest and follow up with her OB. He said Luis looked 12. And then, because the universe has a sense of humor, Jamie came upstairs in his pajama pants and said he was going to the hospital too. I told him maybe he shouldn't and he said, Mom, that's my brother, and he went. He didn't get to see them, and he knew he probably wouldn't, but he sat with his dad in the parking lot while they waited for discharge and then he walked up to Luis when they came out. I wasn't there so I am telling you what my husband told me. He said Jamie didn't touch him, just stood there with his hands in his pockets and said, I'm sorry you're scared. And Luis said, I didn't want you. And Jamie said, I'll be the guy in the waiting room if you need one. Luis made a face and shrugged like he was allergic to being cared about and got in the car with Jessa. That's what we have. Thursday morning Jessa texted me, a short one. She said she didn't want to fight while she was trying to keep a baby inside her, and that she knows she's been extra. She said doctors told her no stress and no sex and no lifting and she was going to do what they said. She did not apologize for anything specifically. I told her I was praying for the baby and for her and that I would like to start over if she was willing. She said she didn't want Lucy at the rehearsal dinner because she thought it would make things tense, and I told her that is not something I can agree to, and she said she figured I'd say that, and she'd talk to Luis. We left it there. Friday afternoon Luis came by the house while Jamie was at work. It was the first time since everything that he walked in like himself. He didn't say ring ring, he just picked Letty up off the floor where she was arranging the plastic fruits and she buried her face in his neck and patted his cheek and told him you sad? And he sort of folded around her. He put her down and asked if he could get the old pack and play out of the basement, and I said of course, and he said, you were right about the dinner, it was stupid, and I just nodded. He said Jessa wants adults only at the wedding reception but she's fine if Lucy comes to the rehearsal dinner and the ceremony and we make sure someone can watch Letty after. That is the first normal compromise I have heard in months and I took it like a glass of water. He also told me he's not going back to work for his dad right now even if he's asked. He said he needs to not be the son on the payroll anymore. My husband had already decided that too, which made it easier, and he's calling around to friends who know someone who knows someone. We can help, but not be the ones to sign his checks. Luis asked me if I could please not talk politics with Jessa at all during this time and I said I would not bring it up for a year if he wants. I would not bring up anything except where the napkins are and if she wants more mashed potatoes. And because there can't be only one surprise a day. As he was leaving he said, also, I didn't hit Jamie first. I must have looked confused because I thought we were avoiding everything like that, but he said in the garage, he said he shoved him because Jamie told him he was scaring Letty and he hates that because he didn't want to be that guy. It's a thin little confession, but it is something, and I will take a something. We set up the rehearsal dinner at the same restaurant where we take everyone for birthdays. Small back room, easy menu. I ordered too many appetizers because I am my mother. Jessa sent me a guest count that didn't include half the wedding party and I asked if she wanted only family and she said no, she just forgot 3 people, and then we were texting like normal women about counts and vegetarian options. She even put a smiley face at the end of one, not the passive-aggressive kind, a real one. I'm not naive. I know we are still walking along the edge of a thing. Cyril came over last night and grilled in the rain under the broken umbrella because he is determined to save us all with steak and playlists. He says he's going to talk to Luis one-on-one without the women around because he thinks they need to remember what they were like when they used to watch soccer together and fall asleep on each other's knees. I don't think that's bad. Jamie took Lucy out for ice cream after Letty went to bed and they came home holding hands, which made me ridiculously relieved for no reason other than it reminded me that they are still who they are, no matter what the rest of this looks like. Today I got a text from an unknown number. It was a grainy picture of an ultrasound and a heart emoji. Then 8W5D. Then don't show anyone yet. I didn't. I sat on the steps and looked at this little gummy bear blob and thought about how we all got made into the people we are by people who were also making it up as they went along. I texted back a heart. Later, after dinner, I told my husband if we're doing this dinner, we do it kindly and we don't keep score. He said, no scorecards, and he meant it. I could hear it in his voice. I don't know how the wedding is going to go. I don't know if the boys are going to stand next to each other or sit across a room and stare at their plates. I do know we are all going to show up and get through it. And I know the way Luis's shoulders looked when he held Letty today, like they were made for holding. I am going to hold on to that. Update 4. I didn't think I'd be back so soon, but apparently we are in our every 24 hours a plot twist era. The shower was today. I wasn't going to go. It was for the girls and Jessa had told Rosa to do her own thing since she was no longer in the bridal party, and Lucy said she'd go if I wanted to but that she didn't want to be somewhere she wasn't wanted, and I told her she is wanted where I am and we could take Letty to the park and let the other side do their thing. Then Teresa texted me please come and that Jessa was having a good morning and she felt optimistic. So we went, just for an hour. We brought a diaper pail and a stack of board books because you can never have too many of either. Teresa met us at the door and hugged me like we had been friends a long time. Jessa was on the couch with her feet up, pale but smiling. When we walked in the room did that weird quiet that rooms do when people aren't sure what they're supposed to be doing. Jessa stood up and hugged me. She hugged Lucy too. It was quick and stiff but it happened. She told Lucy she liked her shoes. Lucy said, thank you, and told her she liked her hair. Then someone's baby cried and everyone moved around and the tension went out of the room like you'd opened a window. Halfway through, someone asked how she and Luis met and I braced myself. She told the story and she was funny and warm and didn't throw a single dart at Lucy or anyone else. Teresa squeezed my hand. I felt my shoulders drop for the first time in weeks. Then one of Jess's friends, who clearly has not been briefed on no stress, made a joke about rehearsal dinners being for when brides don't trust the mother of the groom to do anything right. It was a joke, but it wasn't. The room went quiet again. Jessa sat up straighter and said, actually they're doing it and it's taken care of, we're lucky. I could have sunk into the carpet with relief. Later she told me privately, I'm trying, and I told her I could see that. As we were leaving, Cyril pulled in. He had been kidnapping Louise for lunch. He said they were going to go stare at fish at the aquarium like they were 8 again because he read somewhere that fish lower your blood pressure. I went home and laid down because I felt like I'd been running a race with a bag of flour. 2 hours later my husband's phone buzzed with a text from Luis, a picture of the two of them pressed up against a giant tank with some prehistoric-looking fish behind them, both of them making faces. No words. That was the entire text. Sometimes that's all you need. And then, because nothing happens without something else happening too, Jamie got a call from the tailor that the pants for the groomsmen had to be picked up by end of day. He offered to grab them all and bring them over. He went to Luis's and I paced in my kitchen making a pot of coffee we did not need. He was gone for an hour. He came back with less jaw than he left with. He said he and Luis sat on the stoop and went through every bad thing they ever said to each other and they didn't fix it, but they put the worst of it down. Jamie told him the only reason he stepped down as best man was because he didn't trust himself to keep his mouth shut around Jessa and he didn't want to ruin his day. Luis told him the only reason he asked him to step down is because every time Jamie talks, Jessa flinches, and he didn't want to spend his wedding watching for flinches. They both cried a little and made fun of themselves for it and then argued about who was going to carry the suits inside. It's not a movie. It's two brothers who are tired of their own voices. My husband and I drove by the rehearsal dinner restaurant on our way to pick up paper place cards. We've got someone to watch Letty so Lucy can come and I'm going to put her in a seat on my left and if anyone says a word about fun and drinking they can sit in the parking lot and enjoy a granola bar. I find myself doing things like ironing napkins like it will keep my family together. After dinner, I was cleaning up lettuce off the floor and my phone buzzed. It was Jessa. Got the ultrasound today, baby measuring 2 days ahead. A second later, I don't know how to be in this family yet. I stared at that for a long time. I typed, we didn't know either when we started. Then I deleted it and typed, "We'll help you." Then I deleted that and typed, "Do you like lemon cake or chocolate?" She wrote back immediately, "Lemon." I put lemon on the grocery list. If anyone has a way to make two grown men love each other without bumping into every piece of furniture on the way there, I don't have it. What I have is a reservation in a back room, a baby on a screen we're not telling anybody about yet, a maybe truce with a woman who will be my daughter-in-law whether I am ready or not, and a little girl who keeps patting cheeks and asking if we're sad until we tell her no, baby, we're not sad, we're just people. Update 4. The lemon cake fell in the middle like it lost its nerve. Lucy stood at the counter with her hair slit up in a pencil and said, "We'll fill it with frosting and no one will know." I told her that's not how frosting works and she said, "That's exactly how frosting works." Letty was underfoot with a spatula saying lick? Lick? And I could feel my mother's spirit rising up through me as I overcorrected the tilt of each layer like I could even out our whole month by evening out a cake. Friday morning, the day of the rehearsal, Teresa called and asked if I could ride over early with her to look at a thing with the chairs. That's how she put it. A thing with the chairs. When I got in her car she handed me a travel mug and said, "It's decaf, don't hit me." She looked like she had not slept and also like she had decided not to care if anyone noticed. She told me Jess's dad wanted to try to come to the ceremony, even if it's just to sit in the back for the vows, and asked me if I knew a good place to drop him after if he got tired. I said we have a couch in my husband's office that swallows people. She laughed. We talked about nothing. The good kind of nothing that keeps two women from crying at 9 in the morning. I got to the restaurant and the back room looked smaller than it had when I toured it, because that is what back rooms do, on event days. The manager, a boy who looked 12 with a mustache as brave as a baby squirrel, helped me drag together a few tables and I put the place cards down the way I'd laid them out on my kitchen table twice. Lucy on my left. My husband at the end because he is who you want at the end. I put the little lemon cake down next to a tray of meatballs because that is the life I'm living, and I told the manager if any relative of mine says the words open bar at a rehearsal dinner I will personally wash dishes so he doesn't have to hear it. Jessa came in with Teresa 20 minutes before everyone else, pale and pretty and the glassy look pregnant women get when their stomach and their feet are sending them two different memos. She hugged me. It was not performative. It was a "we're doing this" hug. She told me she felt gross and happy and like she was made out of pickles. I took her to the bathroom because I could see the minute she needed to sit on a closed toilet and look at herself. Lucy came a few minutes later, and I braced for a flinch, but Jessa touched her arm and said, "You don't have to leave early, okay? We've got a sitter for Letty?" "It's fine." Lucy said, "We do, but we'll see," and they stood next to each other in the mirror like two girls trying to make their hair obey in a Walgreens. I wanted to take a picture and also never take a picture again. People trickled in with the little weather systems they bring inside with them. One of Jess's friends called me mother of the groom like it was a job title, and I made my mouth into a smile that could survive anything. Luis walked in looking like himself for the first time in weeks, unshaved, handsome, nervous. He picked Letty up and said ring ring because she was dropped off to us in her party dress on the way, and she yelled hello into his cheek like it was a phone. He closed his eyes and I saw that little click inside of him, the one I fell in love with when he was small, the one that makes him put down whatever he is holding when someone else is crying. Dinner was dinner. Plates made little clinks, the room was too warm and then too cold. The waiter learned we don't let him take your plate without asking. We let people talk for a while before we did toasts. My husband stood up with his water glass and said he wasn't going to give a long speech because my wife ironed the napkins and I don't want to make her cry into one, which made people laugh and also made me cry into one immediately. He said a thing he has been saying to me at night for a week now, no scorecards. He said, "When I came to this country, somebody I didn't deserve gave me a job and a plate at their table. We are going to be those people. We're not keeping score." That room of small back room chairs got quiet like the pause after you've dropped something expensive and it didn't break. Jessa put her hand on her stomach without thinking and then took it away like she was afraid the whole world had eyes. Jamie stood up next, not the best man, just a brother with a water glass too. He looked at Luis the way he used to look at him on Halloween when he pretended to let Luis have the bigger candy bar. He said, "I don't know anything about marriage except to pick someone who makes you want to be nicer even when you don't feel like it. And I don't know anything about being a big brother except you should show up. So I'll show up. That's my toast." Luis swallowed like there was barbed wire in his throat and knocked his glass against Jamie's. I watched Jessa's shoulders go down 1 inch. Then one of Jessa's friends, the one who makes every word a baton, said something like, "Well, I guess we're all behaving tonight," with a smile that shows teeth. I didn't have to say anything because Jessa turned her head slow as a clock and said, "We are." It landed with a soft thud in the room. Teresa looked at the ceiling like she was talking to God and mouthing, "Thank you." Toward the end, Luis asked if he could say something, which is not his way. He's a first in the pool guy, not a speech guy. He thanked us for dinner and said, "Mom, you were right about the nightclub," and people laughed, because that's the safest kind of laughing. And then he looked at Lucy and did a small embarrassment of a bow and said, "I was rude to you. I'm sorry." Lucy nodded like she had expected nothing and been given a little cupcake. Jessa wiped at her like something had gotten in it, which in fact it had. We stood in the parking lot too long because that's what you do when things didn't go wrong. You don't want to risk moving it. Letty took off one shoe and refused to put it back on and limped around the car saying she was a flamingo. My husband texted me a little flamingo emoji from the other side of the hood like we were teenagers, and I snorted in the kind of laugh you do after someone has been in the hospital and they're going to be fine. The morning of the wedding it rained like the sky forgot its job. I cooked eggs no one ate and ironed a shirt twice. Jamie came upstairs with his tie undone and Letty in socks she had put on her hands, and Lucy had a bobby pin between her teeth and somehow also found my glasses that I set down on top of the butter, which I still do not understand. Teresa called and asked if she could drop off a garment bag because the zipper broke on one they had, and I said of course and then answered the door with a towel on my head. She handed me the bag and her hands were shaking. I didn't say anything because she was already saying it. He's coming. He is in her husband. She said, he's determined to walk her down the aisle. If he has to crawl, he said he'd crawl. I said, we like determined, and when I shut the door I put my forehead on it and took one long breath down to my shoes. The church smelled like lilies and wet wool. There is something about wedding mornings that makes you believe in the goodness of folding chairs. Jessa looked beautiful the way nervous women sometimes look beautiful, like if you breathed wrong she would turn back into a person. Her dress did a soft noise, the kind you only hear if you have been in enough fitting rooms with daughters. She saw me and started crying, which made Teresa laugh, and then we were all three of us making a scene in a hallway and trying to fix mascara with fingers. Jessa's dad walked her down the aisle. He was thin in a way that made you want to feed him soup for a year. He had color in his cheeks that looked like it was from effort, not health, but he had the straight back of a man who taught his daughter to check the oil and correct her own work, and it was unbearable in the best way. People stood and the air got holy. Luis's face, my boy's face, did that thing like when he was 5 and realized the ocean didn't end at the horizon, that bewildered reverent look, and his mouth quivered the tiniest amount that only mothers can see. I felt myself love him so hard I remembered the ache of my C-section, like my body wanted to hand him over again and say take him, look at him. The vows were normal, the rings were almost not. The groomsman whose job it was to have them patted every pocket like he was in a sitcom. Jamie very quietly reached into his own jacket and put a ring in Luis's hand. Later I found out Jamie took them from the little box when he picked up the suits just in case, because our family is now the kind where we say just in case. Afterward, in the little side vestry, Jamie flicked the ring box at the groomsmen and said, "You had one job," and they both laughed, but the kind of laugh where you both know you'll tell that story at birthdays forever. We didn't stay for long after the ceremony because of the no kids reception rule, and the sitter we'd booked texted Lucy something I hope her own grandmother never sees, which is a picture of a toddler that looked a little flushed. It wasn't scary, just enough to put that silver line through your stomach. We brought Letty home and Lucy kissed my cheek and said, "You go. It's their thing. We'll come for cake if we can." She meant it. I know when she means it. My husband and I drove back in the rain, holding hands like a superstition. The reception was at a place I can only describe as a hall that had money spent on the lights. The DJ was the kind of man who tells you the traffic on the 7s, and the photographer who kept crouching down like a catcher. We hadn't been there 5 minutes when one of the venue staff, all business and a clipboard, politely asked me if I could help with a guest issue. I braced my entire spine and said of course. It was Lucy. She had come back alone for an hour because Letty fell asleep and Jamie's cousin offered to sit with her, and she thought maybe she could make it to the first dance if she didn't breathe too hard. The girl at the door had stopped her because her name wasn't on the final list from that morning, and adults only did not sway a 19-year-old with a highlighter. I was composing a polite murder when Jessa appeared next to me, barefoot already, holding her heels in her hand like she was done conforming. "She's with me," she said. The clipboard girl said something about wristbands. Jessa said, "She's with me," and then looked at Lucy and did a visible swallow. "Are you staying for the dance? Please stay for the dance." It was that word please that did me in. Lucy nodded and Jessa stepped forward like she had meant to hug her and thought better of it and then did it anyway, a small fast thing. It was like watching a bird decide to land. The first dance was lovely. I don't even remember the song because I was too busy watching Luis do the math of how to hold a woman in a dress and a woman with a baby inside her without gripping either too tightly. He whispered something and Jessa laughed and rolled her eyes, and he kissed her hairline like her head was a prayer book. People took pictures and someone tried to start a chant, and thank God they failed. There were still landmines. Jessa's aunt said something about, "Well, now we'll see if you're ready for late nights," and I waited for Jessa to go sharp, but she didn't. She said, "We'll see," and picked up her water and sipped it like a grown-up. Jamie and Luis disappeared for 20 minutes and I stood in a doorway like a cat until I found them out by the service entrance talking to a dumpster, because that is where brothers say real things. I didn't hear it, but I saw the end. One of those clumsy man hugs where you both do the one-arm slap and someone laughs to break it. When they came back in, Jamie's eyes were red and Luis had that loosened space between his eyebrows he gets when he decides he is not the only person in the room. Later Jamie told me Luis said, "I thought you wanted me to be miserable," and he told him, "I wanted you to be safe," and they both stared at the ground like 14-year-olds until it stopped feeling like a confession. Halfway through, Teresa disappeared and I found her in the hallway by the kitchen with her husband sitting on a folding chair, his breath a little fast. She waved her hand at me like she always meant to be out there and said, "We're just doing the intermission." I sat down on a crate and watched the caterer practice tossing a salad like a magic trick, and we didn't say anything for a bit. Then she said, very quiet, I'm worried about her. I said, me too. We sat there feeling like we'd both run a race in skirts. When she went back in on his arm, I wanted to clap. Somewhere between that and cake, Jessa found me. It's good, she said, nodding at the lemon cake I had bullied onto the dessert table like an auntie. It's better than good. Then she surprised me. I don't know how to be in this family yet, she said again, but not like a text, like a person in a dress said it with the noise of silverware in the background. I said, we didn't either when we started, and this time I didn't delete it. The trick is that nobody knows and we all keep trying. She looked at me like she was memorizing a line for later. When it was time to go, there was no big dramatic exit because somebody forgot the sparklers, and thank every God we have. There was drizzle and the sound of a bus 2 streets over and the glow of a parking lot light that was too green. Luis hugged me so tight I felt my shoulder blades click. He hugged his father with that carefulness again, and neither of them said anything, and then they both said drive safe at the same time. On the way to the car, Luis did ring ring at a baby who was not Letty, and the baby laughed anyway because that's the sound of an idiot uncle in any language. We went home and the house felt like a stage after a show, all the furniture too quiet. Letty was asleep on the couch with one sock on, and Jamie and Lucy were half asleep whispering about if the babysitter had eaten the good chips. I kissed the back of Lucy's head and told her she smelled like hairspray and cake. She said, she was nice to me, and I said, I know. Jamie said, he's still a jerk, and I said, I know, and then he folded his hand over Lucy's knee and added, but he's my jerk, and I had to go pretend to check the front door so that my eyes could drip in private. The next morning there were 3 texts waiting, one from Teresa with a picture of her husband on the couch in my husband's office, a thumb up and that smile people have when they are held together with tape, one from Luis that just said, starting with Marco on Monday. Day crew. Construction. Don't freak out. It's not roofing, and I didn't freak out. I just sent back proud of you and a hard hat emoji Letty found on my phone once and now thinks is a policeman, and one from Jessa, a picture of 2 pieces of lemon cake on paper plates, one bite taken out of one, with he says this is better than our cake. Don't tell the baker. A beat later, spotting stopped. I feel okay. In the afternoon, I took the napkins from the dinner to the laundry because that is the temptation, to keep washing things you can actually do something about. Cyril came by and lay on the rug like a cat while I sorted by tomato and grease and wine I hope, and told me he and Luis were going to watch a game in a bar that smelled like old hat, and if they didn't talk about anything important, that would be important. He said Rosa has decided to be Switzerland, and I told him Switzerland has chocolate, so she picked correctly. Right before bed, when the house had that soft hum of the dishwasher pretending to be the ocean, my phone buzzed again. It was Jessa. We told my sisters, she wrote. They screamed. I could see it, the loud kitchen, the pretty girls, the good chaos. We're waiting on an announcement, she added. 12 weeks. Or longer. Or never. I don't know. Thank you for the dinner. I stared at that line, the thank you. I typed, we'll just keep making plates, and sent it, and then sat at the table with a piece of the fallen lemon cake and ate it with a fork like the person I was when I was 23 and thought cake could fix it all, which is to say, the person I still am. I don't want to tell you that everything is fixed because it isn't. This morning I heard Jamie and Luis in the driveway disagreeing about something as small as tire pressure, like they were auditioning for a commercial, and I'm sure one of Jess's friends will say something I cannot print and I will find myself ironing another napkin like a lunatic. But when Luis left today he crouched down and kissed Letty's foot through her sock and she said uncle, tickle, and he said, always, and that's not nothing. It's a life. It is not quiet, it is not simple, but it is ours, with lemon cake and ring rings and people who are trying and trying again until the trying is the thing that holds.